Here now to talk about DAWs, and that is short for a digital audio workstation. So, what's great is that these days in the 21st century, our computers are so powerful that we can actually create whole albums and singles and songs right on our computers. These days, that's what we call working entirely in the box. And guess what? It's completely possible to do that and make really great songs. In fact, most songs that you hear are almost entirely created and produced using computers. So, right now, we're looking at my laptop, which is host to a number of different digital audio workstations. And another way of thinking about them is that they are software, computer programs that allow you to edit, record, and manipulate music. Right, so we won't get super deep into the back end of how that's possible, but the short of it is that computers are like big calculators. They process numbers at a rate and at a speed that the human being never could. So computers are big calculators. That's where the word comes from. They compute, right? So they compute, they do math at a rate that we as human beings can never do, which opens up a whole host of possibilities when it comes to audio processing and using mathematical formulas to do the work of translating sound into ones and zeros. Now, that's as deep as I'm going to go as far as the back end of how these programs work. And for the rest of the time of this video, I'm going to dedicate to talking about each kind of DAW. Right? So the first one that we're looking at right now is called Reason. Reason is developed by a Swedish company. The first release of this software was in November of 2000, and it's based on the concept of a digital rack, right? So back in the day, the way you made music was you basically racked a whole bunch of electronic devices into one rack. And you see these little screws here? That design is meant to to digitally emulate what a physical rack actually looks like, where you'd actually have each device and you'd have to use screws to screw them into this rack. So for somebody who's coming from the physical world, this was a really cool way to think about making music in the digital space because it still had some of the features of the old world, right? So if you look at the back of the rack, it has these little cables hanging, right? You can actually move them around and create connections between devices, right? So this is something cool and interesting that the designers, the actual illustrators for this device or this digital audio workstation, they took it one step farther by creating this simulation, right? So, and Reason has all the features of any DAW, which would include a transport, which is down here at the bottom. It's what allows you to record and play and stop and rewind and reverse, right? That's called a transport. It has instruments right here on the side. You have instruments that you can drop and drag, and those instruments have a various amount of presets that you can use to change the sound. So here I've put in a drum machine for my drums, and then you have another instrument here that's used for the synthesizer and some of the more ethereal sounds. And when you put it all together, it all sounds like this. Right, and we're going to get into later talking about MIDI and programming But this is the basic look of Reason. So if you ever see this software, you'll know that it's a Swedish software, and it's called Reason, and it's been around for a very long time. Now we're going to move on to Logic Pro. Logic Pro looks like this, right? So it's got a black interface. It's much different from Reason. But if you look closely, a lot of the same features are here. You have the transport up at the top here with the record function, the play function, rewind, and the looping functionality. Right again, over on the side, you have your select for different instruments and sounds. On the bottom, you have your piano roll for your MIDI information. Logic debuted in 1993 as a program called Notator Logic by a company called eMagic. It's a German company. Later on in 2002, Apple Electronics, that we know so well, that creates the iPhone and the iPad and the MacBook and the desktop Mac computers, they purchased the company, the German company, in 2002. And now we know this program to be Logic Pro. So it is very similar to any other DAW in that what you're able to do is compose music. Logic is much more friendly for songwriters and composers. For example, you have a really great feature in Logic that doesn't exist in other DAW. It's the notation feature, the score feature down here, where you can actually drop and drag notes, can move them around. You can actually write a score. So it's really great for composers, great for songwriters. It's very friendly in that it's not so deep on the programming end. But this is essentially what it looks like. This is Logic Pro. Now let's move on to a different DAW. It's called Ableton. This is Ableton. This is what it looks like. What's great about Ableton is that it's really designed to be a live performance tool. It was created in 2001 to be a live music performance tool. And it's actually created by a company called Ableton, right? So the name of the company is also the name of the software, and the software is actually called Ableton Live for that very reason. And this is what the interface looks like. Once again, you see you have your instruments over on the side. You can create and listen for different sounds and audition sounds right over here on the side. You can drop and drag instruments. You also have all of your different tracks here. You can change the size. You have audio tracks, you have MIDI tracks, your master track, which we'll be learning about if you haven't already, down at the bottom. But what's also really cool is Live has features that a lot of other DAW don't have. So for example, there's this crossfade feature down at the bottom, which is really useful for DJs to have two separate mixes happening at once, and they can crossfade between those mixes. That's really cool. Once again, Live is really, it shines the most as a live performance tool, but also people compose in it and create tracks in it, and it works just as efficiently in that way as well. And the last DAW we'll talk about today is the oldest of all. It first debuted in 1989, actually. It's called Pro Tools, and it came on the scene as an answer to the physical limitations of tape recording. We're not going to get super deep into talking about tape, but just know that back in the day, all music was recorded in an analog fashion, and it was recorded to a medium that we call tape. So Pro Tools was designed to basically replace the tape machine, or to create a digital version of a physical tape machine. So as you can see, it kind of looks like that. You don't see some of the same features that you see in the other DAW. You know, you see the transport, of course, but you don't see a whole lot of instruments on the side. You don't see a very easy interface for creators to use, or songwriters, or even musicians, because Pro Tools for the most part shines as a tape machine, as a digital tape machine, where you can record music into it. So you can also create music within Pro Tools. There's an easy enough way to do that. But usually the average modern music producer that's working in the box will choose either Logic or Ableton when it comes to computer programming of synths and MIDI-based music production. Audio-based music production is where I think Pro Tools shines the biggest and the brightest. So that's four digital audio workstations. There are more. There's Cubase, there's FL Studio, there's so many other DAW, but generally speaking, they all function the same. They all allow you to record, edit, and compose music using computer-based software to do so.